and the execution looks good too. The visual appeal of that park is great. It'd make you want to buy a condo across the street, if for nothing else, just to get to use the park. But the question that we raise and what we bring to you is it fair? Oh, you have the contract says what it says. But the contract, the penalty provisions of the contract are based on such things as the cost to the town for having to supervise the project during the delay, which we would submit would be minimal, the loss of the use of the area. Well, the area wasn't used for anything before you built the park to begin with, and you still had the option to use those parts which were not so-called dangerous to children. There's just a lot of reasons why we think that in the exercise of discretion, the $71,000 figure, or even the fallback figure of $50-some thousand is a little heavy for this. Now, it's not that Christophilus and Kennedy won't do their job. It's not that they're saying that they don't want to do their job. It's not that they're saying that they don't want to do the punch list or whatever else they have to do under the contract. But think about that, $1,000 a day, and a large portion of that occasioned by TDEC interpretation of ADA requirements. 2.5 inches over here, a foot or two over here, mulch that had to be accessible by a wheelchair. I don't know how you access an area by wheelchair across mulch. I mean, that would be inviting a lot of difficulty. But that's what the requirements said. So what we're here to ask you is, this is a beautiful park. It's visually attractive. It's got great amenities. I've been out there and looked at it and think I mean, I really am not trying to blow smoke. It's just a great looking facility. I wish we had a facility like that in Sequoia Hills, but we don't. My grandchildren would love it. So I'm asking you all just to look at yourselves and say, is this fair, considering everything? Maybe we do merit some penalty. Maybe we did delay. Maybe things happened that caused this contract to cause the performance to be carried out a little bit longer than it should have been. But $50,000?
I want to ask some questions, maybe of you, maybe of our staff, but let me say this first of all. We do not make the TDEC rules. We have to follow them.
We're aware of that.
Okay. Let me ask this. Were there periods of, I guess I'm asking our staff, were there periods of time where, for days at a time, there was no work being done on the park?
There were periods of time earlier in the contract. In December, there was a 15-day delay waiting for materials to arrive. But other than that, there were people out there almost all the time.
Well, let me ask this. Did we incur costs for our staff for whatever monitoring or whatever unusual kind of work they may have had to do because of...
I probably need to kind of expound on what this gentleman has pointed out, that liquidated damages, it's described in the contract that liquidated damages is not a punishment or a penalty to the contractor. It's really just to cover the additional costs for staff time. You have hard costs, staff time, consultants' time. Those costs aren't minimal. You also have the soft costs, which are, you can look at the fact that we have a $1.5 million investment over there in McFee Park that is not available to the public day after day after day until December 22nd. So yes, there are definitely additional costs, and we have estimated those.
Let me ask Mr. Hale, what are the ramifications if we give relief? Does it set a precedent or what?
I think as Mr. Holla has pointed out, and he's attempted to point out the unique characteristics of this particular situation, and done a nice job of doing it. The problem potentially is that every project, and we can think back over the 10 years I've been doing this, every project has its own unique set of circumstances that can cause, if not anticipated by the contractor, can cause delays to occur. Obviously, if you make a decision to exercise your discretion and grant some degree of relief, then in the future people will come in and they will ask you to do it again. So to some extent it sets a precedent. The board has granted relief in the past on delay damages. I think, as I recall, at Smith Road. They were asked to do it, and they agreed to, under the circumstances, to grant some degree of relief there. It's like every disagreement about these things. It depends on which side you're on, how you feel the equities are. I think under the contract you have the right I think the contract's pretty clear about this. Mr. Holla may someday later suggest that it's not that clear. I don't know what that position would be in the future if we didn't get something resolved here, but I think it's pretty clear what the contract requires, but these are the kind of issues that if this board decides that it wants to grant some degree of relief, it can do so under the circumstances. I would hope that if you did it, you would do it on the basis of circumstances that you believe were warranted and that were such that the contractor was not able to anticipate the reasons for why the project stretched out. Because the next time somebody comes in and wants to make an argument, I would hope that you would make a strong decision here so that we don't get weak arguments. And I don't know, I think it's up to you folks how you view the reasons that have been given for part of the delay. I can't sit here and tell you that I know that everything that has been said is, I'm not suggesting anybody's not saying what they understand the truth to be. I've just not examined the details of all of the circumstances that resulted in the delay. For instance, I'm not clear in my mind that the entire delay here that we're talking about was the result of the TDEC representative making those determinations. The TDEC, as I recall, is providing some of the money that was used to build this park, and I think we would be in sad shape if we didn't abide by what they said when it came to issues where they were contending that there was some safety issue involved. But I would say that common sense tells me that to some degree, if you deviate from the specific terms of the contract, you could be setting a precedent. But that's why you've got this. That's why you're paid so well to have this tough job, is because you've got to make the hard decisions. And this one presents a decision that you have the authority to make if you choose to make it.
if I may, I believe, and I may be mistaken about this, but I believe on November the 8th, before the TDEC representative did their walkthrough on November the 19th, that the town of Farragut had done a walkthrough and did not flag the areas that the TDEC representative flagged. I may be mistaken about that, but I believe that to be the case. There may have been punch list items that were noted by the town of Farragut, but I do not believe those punch list items contained the three so-called safety items, the mulch and the play implements that were flagged by the TDEC representative on the 19th. So if that's true, now that may not be true, and if it's not true, then it isn't true, and these remarks have no relevance. But if it is true, then there might be a suggestion from that state of facts that not only was the contractor caught somewhat off guard, maybe they shouldn't have been in the strict analysis, but they were caught a little bit off guard, and it could very well have been that the town of Farragut was likewise, through no fault of their own, similarly caught off guard. After all, if we're talking about a discrepancy of a distance of 3 inches or so between the terminus point of a slide and a light pole, I'm not sure that there's a lot of folks who would notice that unless you were just finely honed to look at those particular issues. It's not that we're sitting here and saying that we want you all to set a precedent. The fact is, discretion has to be part of every administrative regulation and every interpretation. I'm not unmindful of what you are going through here. My first real job after I finished my tenure with the Chief Justice was as Deputy Law Director for the City of Knoxville. And I was the legal advisor to the Metropolitan Planning Commission and sat there at the Law Director's elbow during City Council meetings. Those were some pretty colorful times. Some of the characters were Kaz Walker, Milton Roberts, and folks like that. We had a real interesting time. But I'm very well aware that that councils, bodies, administrative bodies are constantly being called on to give people concessions. It's in the nature of things. And what you all have to do is use your best judgment. And I believe that if you were to use your best judgment in this instance and grant some relief from these penalties, that it would not be setting a precedent, with due respect to Mr. Hale. It would not be setting a precedent, because each request and each consideration of the request is unique. The contracts are unique. The circumstances are unique, and therefore they stand on their own foundations.
If I may add something, I understand the need for some concession. It's not our intent to beat up on one of our contractors. But I do have to point out that a strict interpretation of our contract would mean that we're still clicking off $1,000 a day. And December 22nd was 50 days ago. So staff is recommending a concession with our recommendation. I have to point that out before you make a decision on this.
Well, let me be the first to say that some of our federal and state requirements are just ridiculous. That doesn't change them. And if somebody is bent on enforcing the very last vestige of any kind of picky measurement or whatever, then that's the way it's going to be. But my question would be, did you know, or could you have known, that the end of the sliding board should have been 6 feet from the pole?